Hi, this is Dan. We're just going to take a session of complete relaxation away from all of the stories and busyness that appears to take up so much space inside our heads. It can be useful to remind ourselves that it's perfectly valid and actually really useful to take this time and to practice just being rather than constantly doing, planning, and attending to things that we think are so important. But the deep rest that we get from these short periods of meditation or mindfulness actually allow us to be far more focused in the rest of our day, because they teach us to be less tangled up in the details. The first things first is just to make sure that you're completely comfortable, that your body is in a position that it's going to be at ease in for the next 30 minutes or so. And of course, if you need to move at any point during the practice, that's totally fine. But for now, you may want to just prop yourself up with some cushions, maybe a cushion underneath your knees if you're lying down. And in this practice, we're going to explore the stillness or the silence that we find at the end of every breath. It's always there, but we completely overlook it. But in that stillness, we can find space to just let go of the rest of our worries. So tune into how you're feeling today. And when we label or make a judgment about how we're feeling, what do we mean by that? How do we know we're feeling a certain way? Don't need to start talking about that in your head. Just see if you can locate whatever it is you're referring to when you make a judgment about how you're feeling. Is it somewhere in the body? Tummy, chest, shoulders, head? Is it something to do with the breath? How fast or slow the breath is moving? Or how smooth or rough it seems to be? Is it something to do with the quality of your mental environment? Something to do with how the thoughts are appearing? What sort of thoughts they are? Most likely it's some combination of all three. So instead of being overly obsessed or overwhelmed by these three experiences of breath, body, and mind, see if you can just take one step backwards, metaphorically, and see that actually you're the one observing all three of those experiences. We're not denying that those things are there. We're not denying the body or the breath or the thoughts. We're not trying to suppress them in any way at all. Or change them so that they're more suitable to our taste. We're simply creating some distance, or some space. In that space we can see, okay, my body, my breath, the way my thoughts are causing me to believe that I feel such and such a way right now. But I don't really have to add that extra story about feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling happy, feeling sad. It's more than enough just to be the knowing of the experiences without any need to label them or add anything extra. And there will be a tugging or a pulling to keep adding new stories around the way that we feel. And that's perfectly normal, that's just our habit pattern, or habit energy. But when we practice techniques like this of stepping back, finding some clarity or stillness, even if it's just for a moment, then we step into this wisdom of seeing that we don't have to add new stories. We don't have to react just because our body feels a certain way. We can fully experience what we're experiencing, even if that might feel unpleasant. Remember that the unpleasantness is just another label. My body feels unsettled in some way, and I'm not really enjoying how the body's feeling today, or how the head is feeling, or the mind, or the breath. That's completely fine. But even that label of unpleasant has been added. All likes and dislikes are just added to our experience. So there are ways of holding on to ourself as the observer or as the experiencer. And one common way is that instead of looking towards the gross objects, we look towards more and more subtle objects. So a common subtle object is the pause at the end of each part of the breath. The pause after we've breathed in and the pause after we've breathed out. The inhale and the exhale are both full of gross experiences or very obvious experiences. There's sound, there's sensation in the nostrils, there's movement in the chest or the tummy. But in complete contrast, the moments where the breath just pauses or hangs there for a moment at the end of the inhale and the end of the exhale. Is a very subtle object. There's no particular quality that we could assign to those pauses or label those pauses with. Really, we only know them because they're different to, or they're framed by, the inhale and exhale either side of them. We find that there's a stillness that's framed by movement of the chest or belly. We find that there's a silence that's framed by the sound of the breath moving in or out. There may still be very subtle sensations in the nose or the sinuses, but they're much more subtle than the air moving in and out. And the longer we focus or look for these pauses, these spaces, or this silence, often the longer they start to stretch out, quite naturally and without any effort or attempt to lengthen them with your will. And that silence or stillness at the end of each breath becomes a really fascinating place. If there's nothing obviously to focus on or to experience, then the boundary or the line between the experiencer or the knower and the thing that is known starts to become very blurred. There clearly is still a knowing, because the experience is still very subtle. It's still framed by more obvious experience. But it might start to feel as if the knower is more obvious than the thing known. That you're identifying more closely with the knowing or with being the knower or the awareness. And you're becoming less identified with the objects that are known or the things that you're aware of. Sometimes it feels a bit like, rather than leaning forward in our seat, trying to focus on something, trying to pick out some detail, it feels as if we just settle back in this big, comfy chair. We stop straining. We just rest back comfortably in what we always have been. Anything that important will stand out. And we can give it our attention if we need to at that time. But for the most part, we're just able to settle back. Just rest comfortably. And now just let your awareness spread out and identify the in-breath and the out-breath again. So you're finding this whole breath. Start noticing the sound again of your breath moving through the nostrils. Noticing the sensation of that air moving and the sensation of movement in the body, in the ribs, the chest, the tummy. And letting that softly grow or spread through the whole physical body. Your breath just starting to connect. Your arms, legs, hands, feet just gradually reappearing to the knower. Noticing that there's a surface underneath you, a bed or a floor or a chair. There are other parts of your body in contact. Maybe just counting up 4 or 5 slow but slightly deeper or more active breaths from 1 to 5, as if you're just climbing up a long silk thread back into the space around you, back into the world that your body's in. And with each breath you become more connected with that space, with that body, but completely refreshed. Knowing that there's this stillness that you can touch at any moment you remember to, even when the day seems most busy or most chaotic. There's still the knowing of that busyness and that chaos that you can just step back into for a moment. Bringing some gentle movement in your own time to the fingers and toes. And a wiggle, maybe growing into a gentle little stretch, or rubbing the hands, rubbing the face, whatever helps you. And it's nice or useful just to take a little intention to try and bring this benefit or this any stillness or any benefit that you felt into the day with you, and that can be a benefit to everyone that you encounter. They can touch that stillness as well if you're still. And I hope that was of some use.